This is Jayquan, and this is Foundation Lesson number 57, the Grandmaster Caz. Grandmaster Caz goes back to the mid-70s, and he's one of the few DJ MC, what I call double threats from that time. You had DJ Hollywood, and you had cats like Lovebug Starsky, but very few cats could simultaneously spin and rhyme at the same time, and Caz comes out of that tradition. One of his first partners was the Disco Wiz, which was one of the first Puerto Rican DJs on the hip-hop scene. Caz was also a member of the Mighty Force, along with Whipper Whip, Dada Rock, and Mighty Mike. He was also part of a group called the Force 5, and he and JDL, the hut maker JDL, were the Notorious 2. Now, that's a lot of different groups to be a part of, and all this was before the group that he's historically known for his association with, and of course that's the Cold Crush Brothers. Now, Caz is also 1/3 of what many call the first holy lyrical trinity in rap music, and that's Grandmaster Caz, Melly Mel, and Kumo D, respectively, of the Cold Crush Brothers, the Furious 5, and the Treacherous 3. Now, if you go and listen to any of the MCs that came after the era that those cats reigned in, what I call the original era or the original school, all the lyrical greats point back to one of those three, or usually all three of those guys as inspirations. That's a very important point. You know, you listen to Cool G rap on any interview, he always says that his inspirations are Mel, Caz, Mo D. Rakim, Mel, Caz, Mo D. You listen to Kane when he speaks, Melly Mel, Caz, and Mo D. In fact, just a little fun fact, when Macklemore did his record a couple years ago and he put Mel, Caz, and Mo D in it, the reason that he selected those three was because he felt that the song he was doing had an old school feel to it, and he needed MCs that represented that era, and he had no idea who to get. And his manager was friends with Big Daddy Kane, and he hooked up Macklemore and Kane, and he asked Kane, who should I get to represent this old school sounding song that I had? And Kane says Mel, Caz, and Mo D. Plenty of times when Kane has been interviewed, he speaks of Caz's direct influence on him. In fact, I think he talks about Caz a little more than he talks about Mel and Mo. And there's a rhyme that Kane quotes pretty often that was one of his, real inspirations as far as what Caz said. And I think Caz said something like 6'3 and a half, no good at math, say rhymes to myself while I'm taking a bath. It was that kind of cleverness that caught a lot of cats from the early days as far as it goes with Caz. If I had to name Caz's strengths, I would say it was his multi-syllabic wordplay early on, one of the definite innovators with the multi-syllabic wordplay, and we'll get into that as we play some music. His cleverness, I'm a stickler for the rhyme being clever, whether you're using metaphors and punchlines or just the essence of the rhyme being a clever one. His storytelling, he's known for the Yvette rhyme, but there's plenty more dope storytelling rhymes he had. And one thing, Caz in his position as the captain of the Cold Crush Brothers. The Cold Crush Brothers are known for their live routines much more so than their recordings. And if you go back and check my Cold Crush piece, it's called Rhymes, Routines, and Records, the legacy of the Cold Crush. Their routines were just the thing of legend. And, Caz is primarily responsible for writing and creating those routines. The live performance was what it was all about with the Cold Crush. And one of the things that I love that Caz did was he kept rhymes on hand for hecklers. So if there was anybody in the crowd that had some negative thing to say, Caz will put them right on the spot with a rhyme that was, a disrespectful rhyme. And that was slick. I never heard anybody else, in those live sets during that time period of the live performances from that late part of the 70s, up till the early part of the 80s, 82 or so, the tapes that circulate. I never heard anybody quite handle a heckler like that, not on any level. So, that's some of the genius of Caz. Now, outside of a song called The Weekend, which I believe was on the Elite Records, that was by the Cold Crush brothers. The Cold Crush recorded for Tough City Records, Aaron Fuchs' record label. And the majority of Caz's 80s solo output was on Tough City as well. You know, Caz made quite a few records. He made a full-length album on Tough City. There's some so-called lost recordings that were reissued on Tough City. So the bulk of what he did was definitely on Tough City Records as far as a solo artist. He also definitely had bright moments in the Wild Style movie from I believe that was 82 or so, and we'll definitely get into a couple of those. And then I'm not going to go a lot into the Big Bank Hank situation, which is definitely something that he's known for. You can check my piece called The Complicated Legacy of Big Bank Hank, and I go into great detail about everything that happened with Hank and Rapper's Delight and Caz. And, you know, back in the days before social media and before YouTube was popular, Troy Smith and myself, we conducted several interviews with Grandmaster Caz and JDL about exactly what happened with the Hank situation. I've talked to members of the Sugar Hill Gang. Unfortunately, I never got Hank, just because, you know, he's just not around anymore. But I've talked to everybody else in that organization. So we probably, between myself and Troy L. Smith, have conducted the most first-hand interviews concerning that situation of anybody. And big up to my man Troy L. Smith from Grant Projects in Harlem. So in this lesson, I'll briefly discuss what happened with Hank and Rapper's Delight in that rhyme, because there's still, to this day, a lot of misconceptions and miscommunications and misunderstandings concerning that. And like I said, I think that we've been in a position where we have talked to enough people who are directly involved, where we got probably as close to accurate accounting of what went on with that record and that whole situation. But there's no way I could skip over that, because that is a big part of Caz's legacy. But when I talk about that, I'm going to talk about it from a different point of view than what you would usually hear Caz talk about Rapper's Delight. And I'm going to share some stuff with you, some audio with you that's very, very interesting, and some video. So for those who have asked for years, when are you going to do a solo Mo D thing? Of course, one is coming soon, because, you know, I did one on Mel, you know, a few years ago. And, you know, again, because people put those three together as three important solo cats and respective leaders of their crews from that, you know, that era, you know, it's only right that I, you know, kind of go in on all three and just give you some, you know, behind the scenes details, some stuff you may have not known, or maybe not to the degree that, you know, that I'll explain it. So I say all that to say, Kumo D coming very soon. But let's get into GMC, the grandest of them all, Grandmaster Caz.
Me, myself, the Grandmaster Caz. I'm going to show you right about now. You tell me which one sounds for real. I'm gonna say it the way I made it up. I'm C-A-S-A and O-V-A-N, the rest is F-L-Y. I got a Ph.D. in mixology, of that fact you can't deny. I don't rock the mic or play my jams like others, that is true. So listen, let me tell you who I am and what I do. Well, I'm 6'1" and I'm loads of fun, and I dress to the T. You say I got more clothes than a pimp got holes in a dress so casually. I got bodyguards, got two big cars, and that show enough ain't the whack. I got a Lincoln Continental and a sunroof Cadillac. I got a business crib in which I live with carpet wall to wall. I got a color TV so I can see the Knicks play basketball. They hear me talk about Chapman's credit card, more money than your mother could ever spend. You know that. But I wouldn't give your mother or your father or your brother not a dime till I made it again. So everybody like that man, because I'm not the back, and I don't believe it. That's so react. I'm gonna take it forth, I'm gonna take it back, because I like the MC to get off my track and rock the house. Check it out.
Yeah, definitely. So that is the original way that the rhyme that was written for Hank to use in Rapper's Delight. And, you know, we've talked about it for the last 20 years, you know, myself as part of the story. And Caz has talked about it since it was a reality and it actually happened. He doesn't talk about it anymore. I don't think he's talked about it since Hank passed. So I don't want to dwell on it too long, but it is a part of the history and the culture of this music. So it's not something that's easy to skip over. But the way that the story was communicated to myself was that Hank was from the Bronx. He was a bouncer at the Sparkle. It was a club in the Bronx. And he was friends with most of the MCs. There are pictures out there with Hank in the Fever hanging out with cats. So, you know, Hank is official, you know, as far as that aspect goes, and his relation to hip hop, not necessarily as an MC, but his you know, he was there. So Hank came from a family that had some money, and he basically was asked by Caz to manage the group that they were in at the time. Now, it probably would have been, I would believe, the Mighty Force. It couldn't have been the Cold Crush, because there was no Cold Crush in '79 when these events happened. So whatever group Caz was with at the time, they needed a sound system. Hank borrowed the money from his parents. He was working in Jersey at a pizza parlor to pay the money back. Sylvia Robinson walks into the pizza parlor. She's already familiar with rap music. She had gone to, I believe it was Harlem World, where she witnessed Love Bug Starsky on the Wheels of Steel. And I believe he was actually rhyming the good times. And this stuck with her and stayed in her mind. And she invited Starsky to Sugar Hill and tried to sign him. He never signed, but he did record there. And he actually recorded to the actual track that became Freedom by the Furious Five. Starsky actually had done a song to that. So that's of great interest. So keep in mind, before Sylvia discovered the Sugar Hill Gang and put them together, she already had tried a couple people at this rap thing. So anyway, she walks into the pizza parlor. Hank is in there rhyming along to a Caz tape or whatever group Caz was with at the time. And I'm thinking it was the Mighty Force.
I was helping make pizza at the shop, and a woman by the name of Sylvia Robinson came into the pizza shop and they asked me, did I want to make a record? Picture this, I'm in the pizza shop, full of dough, flour all over me, and I'm going to audition to make a record. So I go into the back of her son's 98, and they have a cassette in the car, and I'm rapping along with the track. And she really enjoyed it. She said, okay, I'm going to use you on the record. And a week later, we did it. It was done in one take.
To the hip, hop, the hip, to the hip, hop, you don't stop the rocker to the bang, bang, boogie. Say up, jump the boogie to the rhythm of the boogie to beat. Now what you hear is not a test, I'm rapping to the beat.
Released in 1979, Rapper's Delight would become an enduring dance floor hit. But despite its massive commercial success, the song was greeted with scorn within the hip-hop community. They thought it was too soft.
When Rapper's Delight first came out, every, traditional rapper was fucking mortified. They was like, what the fuck are they doing with our, art form? It's like they axe murdered the shit. So, we didn't think that was creditable.
I got a color TV so I can see the Knicks play basketball. Him and talking my checkbook, could it cost more money than a sucker could ever spend? But I wouldn't give a sucker off.
Another criticism of Rapper's Delight was that whole sections of Big Hank's lyrics bore an uncanny resemblance to rhymes previously performed by Bronx MC Casanova Fly.
I met Hank at a club called the Sparkle in the Bronx. We kind of clicked. And we used to talk about hip-hop and parties and stuff. He sounded like he had a good head. So I asked him to be down with us. People from Sugar Hill Records came in and he called me. He said, I want to use some of your rhymes. So I'm really not thinking. Okay? So I said, okay, all right, well, cool, whatever.
I'm the CASN, the OVA, and the rest is FLY. You see, I go by the code of the doctor of the mix. These reasons I'll tell you why.
The CASN, the OVAN, the rest is FLY. That's my name, spelled out, Casanova Fly. He didn't even change it to say Big Bang Hank or to say, he just rhymed the way it was in the book.
I can understand why he would say that, and I have nothing but love for him. I mean, we used a lot of stuff together. I guess he, because he didn't move to that magnitude, or I couldn't bring him in because it was something that Miss Rob had already formatted. But some of the stuff was done together, and I just transposed it over.
At that time, I mean, I had already made a name for myself. People knew me for my rhymes. All right? So people was like, yo, I heard you on the radio. I heard you on the radio. I'm like, yo, that ain't me. Yo, but I heard your rhymes. Yeah, I know. That's not me though. That's this kid Hank. Yo, I know you're getting paid though. Yeah, well, you know, this and that. Yeah. It's fucked me up ever since.
And as he's rhyming, Sylvia hears it and she said, "Oh, you rap?" Because again, and she has this thing in her mind that she can make some money off of this music, because at the time her labels were going through bankruptcy and she's trying to get her empire back on track. So she thinks that this rap thing is something that's going to be able to help her dig herself out of this financial hole that she's in. So she sees Hank rhyming and she asks Hank, "Look, are you a rapper? Do you rap?" And Hank said, "Yeah," which, that wasn't true, but he said, "Yeah." She said she was putting a group together. She gave him a little impromptu audition. He came out of the pizza parlor, rapped in the car for her. She put him down with the group. That's basically it. Now, where the controversy comes in is that he went to Caz and said, "Look, this lady wants to make a record. She wants me to rap. I don't have any rhymes. Can I borrow your notebook?" Caz gives him this book and says, "Here, use whatever you want." And that's where the story goes from there. Again, if you go and look at my lesson or my piece called "The Complicated History of Big Bang Hank," I go into far more detail than what I'm telling you here, but that's the basic story. But the thing of interest is, okay, you heard what Caz just did on the original rhyme that he wrote. Now it sounds like Hank changed a few words around. I'm supposing it was Hank. On an interview at one point, Hank said that him and Caz did some stuff together. So I don't know if Caz changed those words and said, "Say it like this." I don't know what happened. I wish I could have talked to Hank before he departed. And rest in peace to Big Bang Hank, Henry Jackson. So, of course, we've all, for the last 20 years or more, that this thing has really been in the forefront, that, definitely these were Caz's rhymes that Hank used. Everybody else wrote their own parts in the song. Wonder Mike and Master G were already down with Cruz, Sound on Sound, and Phase 2. They were already rapping when this thing happened, so they said their own rhymes. Hank used Caz's rhymes. But for the last couple decades, we've all kind of tripped off the fact that, Hank didn't even change the name. I'm the CAS and the OVA, of course. Casanova Fly is one of Caz's handles that he uses. But more so than that, when you delve a little deeper into Rapper's Delight and you listen to the long version and you hear some of the things Hank said, like when he said, "From the time I was only 6 years old, I never forgot what I was told. It was the best advice I ever had. And it came from a wise, dear old dad. Sit down, punk, I want to talk to you, and don't say a word till I'm through." All these are Hank's rhymes. And he's saying there's a time to laugh, a time to cry, a time to live, and a time to die, a time to break and a time to chill, to act civilized, to act real ill. But whatever you do in your lifetime, you never let an MC steal your rhyme, which is very interesting because in that rhyme, Hank has just stole that rhyme. Or not, he didn't steal it, but Hank has just used somebody else's rhyme and never went back and actually paid the man any money or said, "Hey, we got this record deal. I can bring you in and bring your group in." None of that ever happened. So just the irony of him saying that rhyme. But then later he said, "From 66 to this very day, I always remember what he had to say." All that is a very personal story from Caz's notebook. So I always found that of interest once I found out that Caz was the actual author of all of Hank's words on Rapper's Delight. So again, that's as deep as far as I'll go on that. Again, it's hard to escape it or get past that because that is a huge part of Caz's legacy. He's the first ghostwriter ever in the game, and that's what it is. But good to be able to hear how that first part of the rhyme actually went, and then how it sounded on record.
It was a long time ago, but I never forget. I got caught in the bed with a girl named Michelle. Well, I was scared like hell, but I got away. That's why I'm here telling you today. I was out at my school, sweeping up and rocking. A crowd of people all around. Listen to my spot. Just me and my fam, and some guys from the crew chilling hard, cause we had nothing better to do. It was me, the L, the A, and the R. And then I slipped away to make a phone call this very day. It was a move I regret, but it didn't know then, so I called me back. Said, hello, pretty mama, it's your lover man. She said, baby, come on over as quick as you can. I said, I can't come now. Someone's coming to get me. Then she said, I'm all alone, there's nobody with me. Thought for a second, oh shit, she's alone. And I was knocking at the door, but she hung up the phone. She let me in the house and gave me a kiss and said, give me that thing that you know I miss. And so we went into a room and we got high, but she couldn't keep her hand from off the fly. So I made her lock the door. Went to check it when it came back in. The girl was naked, that was my cue. I took her clothes off and started on the proof. Well, I was tearing shit up and about to want to speak to the cast. Somebody's coming, I said, yeah, me. When the door bust open and there was a folks, so damn, they couldn't wait to say damn, they couldn't wait to say damn, they couldn't wait until the finish was thrown. My mother was a shotgun from the reach on the shelf, pulled down the 45, I almost shit on myself. Said, please don't shoot, please don't shoot. You'd have done the same thing if you was in my place, but if you spare my life, believe me, friend, you'll never see me around your daughter again. Don't ask me why, but he let me leave. I ran 26 blocks and I stopped to breathe. Gave thanks to God, he wasn't too upset. Went home and thought about poor Yvette. He wasn't Peter ass with everything I assume, cause I could hear the girl screaming all the way in my room. Even though I don't see Yvette no more, well, I know she ain't as fine. I know she ain't as fine. I know ain't half as fine that she was before. So you know my voice is so my boy.
Yeah, I remember having the Wild Style soundtrack before I saw the movie. I saw the movie 83, 84, somewhere in there. It was actually on television. Never got a chance to see it at the theater, of course, you know, being outside of the tri-state area. But I remember having the soundtrack, you know, as soon as it dropped and just listening to that rhyme. And I just thought, you know, when I talk about cleverness, and also there's an element of humor that Caz usually had in his stuff, and it tied into the cleverness. You know, he ran 26 blocks, then he stopped to breathe, and he says it very matter-of-factly. Like, you know, like he really ran that long, and then, you know, hey, I had to breathe after 26 blocks. I was tearing shit up about 2:45. She said, Caz, somebody's coming. I said, yeah, me. You know, the humor and the cleverness. This is 82 when the rhyme is said. I don't know when the rhyme is written, because Caz has a lot of rhyme notebooks and he has a lot of rhymes. So just because the movie came out or was done in that 82 time frame doesn't mean that that's when it was written. But a great story, just the way that he put that story together. You know, he's hanging out with his boys, listening to the box, slips away to call his girl, and the whole way the story went. The story was dope anyway, but then the way he actually structured the rhyme and the cleverness to the rhyme, one of the great stories, in my opinion, and in the opinion of a lot of other MCs that are great MCs today. Their influence to tell stories was birthed with Caz, and particularly with that particular rhyme.
Ready on the right. Yeah, boy. Going out to the one and only Creston Posse. 181 Creston Ave, Boogie Down Bronx. We in full effect. Creston Ave, 181st Street. It ain't the best street, it ain't the worst street either. Uptown Bronx, off the concourse, grand. And don't stand around the corner, my man. Don't let the posse catch you resting. Homeboys around the way, they don't play on Creston. Dollars is what we're clocking. Trays are pumping, Rob is rocking. Supers booming, fresh like a condo. Posse in effect, except when behind those rolling. Who's holding? Then we're jetting. Agua stop sweating. Then we start letting cussies in Candy Shorty and Randy Javier and Divine Chiz niggas online. Creston Posse. Creston Posse. In full effect. Creston Posse. Creston Ave, on the corner. We ain't no joke, so you must be on a mission. Stupid or a dope addict. To one static, because we're so good at it. Creston Ave, we like God there. The whole posse got hardware. Tanner got a mag, Vine got a 9, and Harvey rocks the Uzi. Who said crime don't pay? Stupid, we get dope, cause little Johnny Gray G and bridge over the trains, under the ruins, through the remains, around the crime and pollution, and tell me where I fit in. South Bronx, New York, that's where I dwell. To a lot of people, it's a living hell, full of frustration and poverty. But wait, that's not how it looks to me. It's a challenge, an opportunity to rise above the stinking debris. You gotta start with nothing, and then you build. Follow your dream until it's fulfilled. Warrior, my art is my sword. A place in society is my reward, because a mind is a terrible thing to waste. Success is something we all want to taste. Everyone has talent on this earth, and you can take it or leave it for what it's worth. No matter how hard things may seem, you've got the potential, fulfill your dream, because we're the future, and it's up to us to make our home rate an A+. Let your mind be pure and free to create. Use the beat in your heart and aim to be great.
So yes, the first one, Creston Ave, that was my joint, and that's produced by Said G. A dope solo joint by Caz that I didn't hear until much later on one of those Tough City re-releases. So I'm not sure exactly the original year, or if it ever came out before the those re-releases on Tough City. But definitely one of my favorites, and definitely production again by Said G that was just crazy. Of course, just flipping that Rufus Thomas Funky Penguin, and and adding some nice drums to it. So knowing the part that the Cold Crush Brothers played in Wild Style and the Wild Style soundtrack, whenever I hear that subway theme, it always takes me right to those scenes in the movie where they dropped that. Looking back on Wild Style, some of it may look rudimentary today, and it was rudimentary, the way that it was done. I've talked to Charlie Ahern, and it was done on less than a shoestring budget. And, he didn't really know what he was doing. He was a very, very amateur filmmaker at the time. But looking back on it, they put something together that was incredible. And just the way he told me that, Theodore scored that, they got the band that was basically, Chris Stein and the people from Blondie, and they played these break beats, and they shot the movie, and then Theodore had to watch the movie and actually insert the scraps of music and pieces of things that he had to actually score that movie. And it was brilliantly done, again, on a zero budget, but historic recordings.
Dios mío, in Spanish or English, I had to bring this, and I know that you probably think this is a joke. So laugh, sleep on me, snore, feel the wrath of a giant like never before. Return to the environment to see where the fire went. I'm not 65, I'm not retiring, a legend in the old school. Better today, I bust a sucker in a battle the same old way I did when I used to. I got to choose to put the best you got against me, and they'll lose to the grandest master, the pope and the pastor, the judge and jury. And if you think I am a Rastafarian or Jamaican, you're mistaken. I specialize in rapping and flaking on sucker MCs and wannabes. Beat me in a battle? Nigga, please. Ain't no one better than the rap veteran. And this here is just another feather in my cap, because my rap is synced to the beat, just like a hi-hat. You can try your damnedest to understand this. Showtime is at 2 to see the grandest. Get down, get down. Grandmaster. Better that you can mess with the real McCoy. You gotta be great to try to rate with the Hall of Fame rhymes that I create. And even if you can, let's get the flash in the pan compared to the way I am when the mic's in my hand. MCs I romp, they ain't no comp, and when they try to get familiar, I stomp them out because I'm what it is and they was, and no one does it to you like the captain does. Get down, get down. Grandmaster.
Here we point him out, my man right here, point him out. Yo, Caz, see my man right there? Go on him, go. Yo, go. Wonder who each and every time we put the music low or turn it down for a second to make you say ho. Somebody somewhere deep inside the crowd has to make a comment or snap out loud. No matter where we are, no matter where we play, there's always a knucklehead with something to say. So since I'm on the subject, I thought I'd mention a little something to you. You want attention? Pay $5 or $6 to get inside. No girl wants your ugly ass, so you sit and hide. Wait for an opportunity to scream out boo, then leave like a sucker when the jam is through. Go home and tell your friends that the party was whack. Next week we got your money cause you came right back. But this time, you brought your girlfriend too? But the bitch is thinking ugly, even worse than you. Or so you're stepping through the front to watch us rap and not knowing all along that I set a trap. And no soon as you open up your mouth to me, I'll be snapping all over you and you're free. First of all, you're a duck with wings and a tail, and every stitch of your clothes is from a fire sale. None of your colors match, not even your sock, and your shoes are so cheap you can feel every rock. Don't try to play high post, it ain't your station. Got your coat from the army, they call salvation. Piss on yourself, that's why you slash a damn. And when it comes to cash, you ain't got a stamp. Don't mean to hurt your feelings, but I know cuz you ain't had no pussy since you knew what it was. If you don't want me snapping, I'll tell you what, next time you're at my party, keep your big mouth shut. You gonna shut up? Yeah. Aight. Yeah. Aight. Continue on at the ranch at a brand new branch. Who next? Who next? Who next? Talking that shit, man.
Yeah, so 1987 was Get Down Grandmaster. That's another Said G production. And that one, you know, for that time period, that was right around the time that Rakim was just starting to get hot. He had just dropped his first single the year before. You know, Kane's coming in, and that whole so-called golden era is really really full-fledged in 87. Your PE is in the midst of their first album, so that's the time frame. So that song, you know, it fit really well in that time period. I thought lyrically he definitely was holding his own on that. We're talking about a cat who's been doing it since, you know, 75, 76 or so. So in 87 he was still on top of his game, and beat-wise he was right in the pocket with Cez production. You know, Ultra's on Fire by 87. And there was really no reason that song shouldn't have been a little more celebrated than it was. But I always felt like with the Cold Crush brothers and with Caz, with their recordings, it was just the fact that Tough City, first of all, Tough City had a lot of artists signed to their label. You know, we know more about Spoonie G and Davey DMX because they were the most successful on the label as far as sales. But there are a lot of other smaller and less well-known groups on Tough City. And after they lost their distribution deal with CBS, which was sometime after 84 or 85, right around that time, they just weren't able to promote the artist, or they didn't promote the artist, whatever the case was. I believe that a lot of artists that were on Tough City, you know, it was a great independent label, but I believe that just they didn't have the power to push a lot of the artists that could have been bigger. I think Lakim Shabazz could have been a bigger artist. As big as the 45 King got as a producer, I think he could have been even bigger if he had a little muscle or a little more muscle behind him. That's just my personal thing. I remember talking to JDL from the Cold Crush, and he kind of echoed that as well. He said that most of the promotion dollars went behind Davey DMX and Spoonie G, and he felt like their records really weren't pushed as well as they could have been because of that fact. But however, again, for 87, that record was definitely hot and in the pocket. And the style that he was using on that record, I talk a lot about that style, especially when I'm discussing Rakim. And whenever I discuss Rakim, I discuss the way he does his patterns, and I've done several Rakim pieces talking about that, so I'm not going to waste any time further on it here. But, you know, that style is attributed to Kool Moe Dee and Grandmaster Caz. So Caz on his record doing that style is just a return to something that he was an early pioneer with anyway. Another thing I've spoken on with Caz, and I said it at the beginning of this piece, is that one of his strengths, in my opinion, is definitely the live stage show, the routines and whatnot. Well, within the live stage show, how he had these ready-made rhymes for hecklers, and he would diss the hecklers whenever they would boo or do whatever in the audience. And that's what you heard there, and that was definitely on point. Like I said, I've never heard of all the live shows that I've heard from that era of like 78 is the earliest live hip-hop tape that I've ever heard. From 78 on to, right around the time of 82, 83, when the live shows started dying down as far as this particular school of MCs. I've never heard a crew or an MC actually have a rhyme ready for hecklers, and I thought that was really, really dope the way that Caz did that. So just another piece of artillery that he has, another sword that he has to add to his to the weaponry that he has, and just another strength.
Grandmaster Caz, I'm doing the thing. I write a rhyme, do a dance, and even sing. Now I can play away until the break of day. Put you on hold like the old days. We'll feel and make sure it's real. And if you go and get your brother, I won't feel the splash and mash. Make it go gas, there's no passion or flash. But I don't stash, just step my best. And request my guest not to mess with the set. And I possess. Think it's smoke, but I won't choke. I'm definitely broke for being broke. To me it's a joke. I'm ready G's out of please. With all the ladies, I got the car empty for my main street. 4 kids after this, I promise. If you insist, I'll put you on the list. I got a crew known to you. Before I'm through, I'll introduce all of them to you. Trying to change in the place, put the face in grace. Keep the pace in the race, the faith first place. Tony Joe, not alone. And he has shown to be known and prone to make the girls his own. Stay well, rockin' well, and time will tell. If under his spell, and wait and fell. Without the cream on the team, it would seem like a double salty without the cream. KG, OG, rough MC, a rockin' endlessly, and very thoroughly. And this crew I fit and meant legit. I couldn't be with a better outfit.
Yeah, so Caz is going off. That's one of his joints where he displayed a little bit of multi-syllabic wordplay. There was a couple of versions of that. He did one on the Rap Mania pay-per-view concert back in the early 90s. And that one was a little more up-tempo. I prefer this one, which is off one of those Tough City reissues. I think it was the You Need Stitches Tough City reissue. And that second cut was just from a live performance, and I've heard him say that same rhyme live, and it's different variations on it. He changes certain words, but to really appreciate that rhyme, you have to have a little collection or at least a little knowledge of some of the live performances, because again, their magic was live. Honestly, the Cold Crush and Caz, their records, and I said this in the Cold Crush piece, and this is with all due respect, everybody just wasn't good at making records. Some of the best crews out there that were incredible live just didn't make records that stand the test of time. And Cold Crush had a couple good records, and Caz definitely had a handful of good ones as well, but the live performance was much more where it was. It's just a certain chemistry that goes into records, and it's just a lot. It's the producer, it's the label, it's a lot that goes into it, a lot more than just getting up on stage and the group doing what it is that they do. But in that particular rhyme, as many of Caz's better rhymes, for that whole rhyme he's rocking the multisyllabic, like I always talk about. The fact that it's not just the last word of each sentence that rhymes, it's the last word and several words within. And Caz is very great with that and very influential. The MCs that were influenced by Caz, most of the time when they talk about the greatest influences on them, it is the multisyllabic wordplay that he exhibited in many of his rhymes.
A rumor, you want a true love, and so you're out there looking for a new love. Your quest is ended, your search is over. Don't look any further, cause here comes for the ladies. What do you dream of? What is your fantasy? What makes you scream, love? What turns you on and what makes you hot? Name anything that you like a lot, and it'll all be yours. Behind closed doors and limousines, restaurants or ballroom floors. If your man can't deliver, tell him it's over. Time to get busy with the captain.
I never get past 5, cause I'm fly.
And I'ma put you on hold, cause I'm bold.
And Charlie Chase will last, cause he's fast. And Tony Tone got full, cause he's original.
The Cold Crush is on,
cause we perform. And even in a storm,
we'll keep you warm. Hey crew,
yeah Cap,
we're gonna need a little scratch for the rap now.
Tone and Chase, yeah crew, you're the DJs, what you gonna do?
Whiting MCs, you're all a pain in my neck, huh? They should be sending me your royalty check. You just bit my rhyme, didn't pay no tax. Copied the music from someone else, put it on wax. I'm mad as hell, cause it's bound to sell. And you be biting what I'm writing, and people can't tell. You change it around, disguise the sound with no prior desire to write. That's why I frown on those of you that don't strive to be original and write like the captain do. Just put your teeth away and try someday, and you can quote it, cause I wrote it only yesterday. At one time, me and my niggas had it locked like ours. They compared us like Jay-Z, Biggie, and Nas. Before videos, Palm Pilots, and CD-ROMs. Y'all fucking DD, son. We was fucking DD moms. Ghetto fab up in the lab, coming up with that fly shit. You did you, he did him, and I stayed doing my shit. Had more fans this summer, no Benz and no Hummer. My man's in Mo from another borough. We thorough like them hood dwellers, the original good fellas. And my man Jayquan gon' get the whole hood jealous. Got a track and 3 legends. What more do you need? GM Caz, and I'ma smoke this like all of your weed. Step to the foursome and get 8 like Egg Foo Young. It ain't that we too old, it's just that they too young. Y'all better leave these Macs alone before you get blown like a motherfucking saxophone. Yo.
Yeah, so Caz's legacy is one more of influence than anything else. Again, when he's compared to Melly Mel and Mo D, Mel had the hit records in the beginning stages of rap, and also just the history of Mel as being one of the first respected MCs, and everything that goes with Mel. Mo D, definitely the wordplay and everything else that goes with Mo, the poetic mastery of Mo D, and then of course the career that he had from that late part of the 80s into the 90s, blowing up in that golden era and being a household name and going to the top echelons of the game. Caz never had hit records, he never had the stardom or the name, but I was talking with Caz, I think it was like 2 years ago, we were just talking about MCs and just influence. And he said something very true. He said that if you trace those who are regarded as greats lyrically in the game, and whoever they say their influence was, if you go back and check their influence, and you keep going back, you can't escape getting around, this particular group of MCs. And truer words can never be spoken. You go back and you listen to the LLs and the Kanes and the G-Raps and the Rakims and the Nas's and all those who are revered as great MCs. You always hear the same names come up, and Caz is definitely one of those names. So that's his legacy, along with everything else that he's accomplished. But I say the biggest part of his legacy is one of influence and influencing those who went on to become great. And I hope you found that entertaining and educational and all those good things. You can hit me up on all social media at Jayquan VA. That's JayQunVA. If you'd like to make a donation to the foundation, you can do so at patreon.com/Jayquan. If you'd like to make an ongoing donation or a one-time donation at Cash App, and that's $Jayquan1. That's JayQuanMone. Or PayPal is JayquanMusicVA@gmail.com. Peace and respect.
Ladies and gentlemen, Grandmaster Caz, CASNOVA, and the rest is FLY. Yeah. See, I go by the code of the doctor of the mix. These reasons I tell you why. Cause I'm 6'1" and I'm tons of fun and I dress to a T. I got more clothes than Muhammad Ali and a dress so viciously. What you got? Got bodyguards, got 2 big cars that definitely ain't the what you try. I got a Lincoln Continental and a sunroof Cadillac. So after school and take a dip in the pool, which you really off the wall. Yeah. I got a color TV so I can see the Knicks play basketball. Can't be talking about checkbook, credit card, or money that is sucker, whatever spend. Keep it going. But I wouldn't give a sucker or a pump from the rucker, not a dime till I make it again. Everybody go hotel, motel, what you gonna do today? Gonna get a fly girl, gonna get some spank job off in the depot J. Everybody go hotel, motel, holiday inn. Say if your girl starts acting up, then you take her friend. Master G, my mellow, showing you so what you gonna do. Well, it's on and on and on and on and on. The beat don't stop till the break of dawn.